fighter plane flying at 600 miles per hour is flying at about 900 feet per second. The formula for the turning radius is v squared divided by the acceleration. 900 squared is 810,000. The acceleration of 9g's is 9 times 32.2 feet per second, which is the acceleration of gravity. And you get a number of about 2,800 feet as the minimum turning radius for a fighter plane at its operating altitude. Air-to-air missiles turn at 12 Gs, but they're traveling at a much higher velocity. They can be traveling up to 2,500 feet per second. The way an air-to-air missile works is the motor turns on, it accelerates, it hits a maximum speed, it cruises along at that speed for some time, the motor burns out, and then it glides. The typical air-to-air missile, about 60% of its effective range, it's a glider. Its speed is being reduced, and the ultimate range is determined by the point at which it still has enough velocity, so it has the kinetic energy for maneuvering to attack a fighter aircraft. If the missile is turning at 1,800 feet per second, when you square that, that's 3.2 million. At 12 Gs, it's about 400. It has a turning radius of about 8,000 feet. The way the missile works is it can turn quicker than the fighter plane can turn. For the fighter plane to turn, it has to roll its wings and begin the turning maneuver. It takes time for that turn to maneuver. The missile can turn close to instantaneously. It has winglets set in an X pattern, and it can turn in any direction almost immediately. The fighter plane's wings, to turn, you have to move an aerodynamic surface, an aileron. It takes time for the flow to develop over the wing. The longer the wing is from front to back, the longer it takes for that flow to develop. The missile is operating at supersonic speed, so the aerodynamics are different, but it also has much smaller winglets. So its reaction time is much faster. It has to detect the plane turning, but once it does, it goes into its full turn and is trying to use the fact that it's traveling faster to cut off at an angle and intercept the fighter aircraft. It is possible to build a missile that can have the same turning radius as a fighter aircraft. Its winglets would have to be much larger, probably about 4 times the size. That would make it very difficult to mount under the wing of a fighter plane. So it'd have to be ground launched, or it would have to be carried on a larger plane like an air freighter. It would also be traveling at a much lower speed than a traditional air-to-air missile. So it'd be traveling at maybe 1,300 feet per second. If you square that, you get 1.69 million. If you want 2,800 feet, you've got a number of around 600. You've got 19 to 20 Gs of turning. That amount of force has to be taken up by the wings and the fuselage of the missile. That means they have to be much heavier. That would tend to impair the range. So you'd have to have a booster rocket to actually carry it into position. The booster would separate, it would have air brakes open up, and it would just disappear, fall out of the sky. The missile would have an air brake attached to the back. The air brake would only operate once. It would open, it would take the missile down from whatever speed it's traveling at, 2,000, 2,200 feet per second, down to 1,300 feet per second. At that point, it would fall off and fall to the ground. The missile would have solid fuel and compressed oxygen as an oxidizer. That way it can be throttled so that it can better maintain position with a fighter plane. It would still be flying significantly faster than the fighter plane, but now it can maneuver with it. So when a fighter plane goes into a turn, it can follow the fighter plane physically into the turn to intercept it. The compressed oxygen is a hazard. The cylinder containing it can blow up, but you now have a much more flexible missile. It's possible to use them to fight what amount to air-to-air battles. Instead of just sending the missile at the fighter plane, you might send mismatches of missiles. So if you have 4 fighter planes, you might send 6 missiles. If the fighter planes manage to avoid the first 4 missiles, the next 2 missiles are maneuvered. So the first 4 missiles may proceed without using their air brakes, flying at their maximum speed. The other 2 missiles open their air brakes so they can maneuver. If the 4 missiles don't intercept the fighter planes, they then open their air brakes and they start maneuvering. In the meantime, the other 2 missiles are maneuvering into the airplanes, trying to intercept at least 2 of them. The 4 missiles that were ineffective, that the fighter planes avoided, would then turn around in various patterns to form intercept patterns on the fighter planes. This could be controlled by human controllers or perhaps by a more advanced learning system. And the idea is to actually fight a tactical battle, positioning the missiles so that whichever way the fighter planes turn, there's a missile ready to intercept it. This means that potentially an AWACS aircraft could become a fighter plane. The AWACS aircraft has the radar, and you have a freighter flying alongside of it carrying these missiles. either under its wings, along its fuselage, or perhaps tossing them out the back door of the freighter.